Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Breaking news, the Washington Post has just obtained a draft of a report that has been prepared for the Senate about Russia's interference in our 2016 election, and it describes it as the most sweeping analysis yet of Russia's disinformation campaign. The report studied the millions of social media posts provided by technology firms. And here's what it found, according to the paper, that Russia used every major social media platform to help elect Trump, that all of Moscow's messaging was intended to benefit the Republican Party, specifically Trump, and that on Facebook alone, Russia's campaign reached 126 million people. It reached another 20 million people on Instagram. With us now, one of the Washington Post reporters that obtained this report and is breaking this news, Craig Timberg, and our chief media correspondent, Brian Stelter. Craig, how is any of this different from what we've already learned about Russian interference? Let's start there.
This in many ways is the report we've been waiting for. It's sweeping, it's comprehensive, it uses the fullest data set we've seen yet from the companies who turned over lots of information to the government that they didn't turn over to anybody else. And so it doesn't exactly tell us things we didn't suspect or haven't heard, but it puts it all together in a new way, and it's very comprehensive and compelling. I feel like they kind of reverse engineered the entire Russian disinformation campaign in this one report.
In your report, you write that this report found the Russians, quote, worked even harder to support Trump while in office. While in office, how so?
Every platform that these researchers tracked posted more often after the election. YouTube in particular went up by some remarkable degree. And so we tend to think of this narrative in terms of, coming up to election day, but actually intensified after election day, and was still intensifying when the social media companies took this data, took these accounts down from the Internet Research Agency in Russia sometime around the middle of 2017.
This is an amazing report, okay? That is the author, Craig Timberg, and this is the Washington Post article that he wrote. It is unbelievable. It's shocking, and it shows a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin's Internet Research Agency. I don't know what more direct a line you could draw between Russia and the United States and the election than this straight line that goes through the Russian intelligence services into Donald Trump's campaign and comes out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I don't know how else. I don't know how people can't see this straight line. I mean, it's just stunning, okay? This is a report that was put together for the U.S. Senate. It was put together by Oxford University, where the Rhodes Scholars come from. Hello. Oxford University's Computational Propaganda Project. Did you hear what I said? Oxford University's Computational Propaganda Project and Graphica, that is a network analysis firm. It has all the details in there about how the Russians, working through the Internet Research Agency, who Mueller has indicted. Yes, Mueller's charged the Internet Research Agency with criminal offenses. And what they were doing was they were psychographically profiling Americans. This goes back to the Cambridge Analytica, Chris Wiley whistleblower stuff that we were aware of, because Chris Wiley, with orange and pink hair, was not afraid that somebody would target him and hurt him, thank God, and spoke up and spoke out repeatedly about what the Mercers and Steve Bannon were doing with this survey that was created by a guy in St. Petersburg who was going back and forth to Russia, put up a survey on Facebook. You would take the survey And it would tell them what kind of a person you were. Were you a Republican? Were you a Democrat? Were you into Black Lives Matter? Were you into against Black Lives Matter? Who were you? What were you doing? And not only that, but it would tell them the list of your friends and the list of your friends' friends, and exponentially grow that list by psychographic profiling you, your friends, and your friends' friends. And then they could target individual ads, individual messages, individual fake news articles to you. Everything from the National Enquirer, Hillary's dying, Hillary's gained 103 pounds, Hillary had a stroke, Bill's got Alzheimer's, all the way to Blacktivist and Black Lives Matter, and how could you vote for Hillary? She once called black kids child predators, right? And they were doing it not only to sow chaos, but to promote Donald Trump and to depress the turnout for Hillary Clinton. And what we ended up with was an election that was decided by less than 30,000 people in 3 swing states. So this is the report that draws the straight line between all of that was going on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter to the Russians for the Trump campaign. So they sliced Americans into key interest groups for the purpose of targeting messages. Now, you know this Brad Parscale dude who, was going to Barnes & Noble and tapping people on the shoulder and asking them, you need a website? I could build you one for $1,500. Now, all of a sudden, he's saying he's creating tens of thousands of ads a day at his firm. Tens of thousands of ads a day. And they're looking to see, do people like green or do they like red? Are they responding to black? Oh, my God. This guy was so purchased by Jared Kushner. Remember, that was the one that found him because he had built a website for one of Jared Kushner's real estate projects. That's how he knew this guy. And like I said, this guy was charging $1,500 for a website. And his best advertising was going to the neighborhood Barnes & Noble and saying, hey, you need a website? I can build you one. $1,500. What the researchers got were they got the data. They got the actual ads. They got the sets of ads. They were provided these ads by Facebook, by Twitter, and Google. And they got several years worth up to the middle of 2017. And what the report says, I'll quote it. What is clear is that all of the messaging clearly sought to benefit the Republican Party, specifically Donald Trump. Trump is mentioned in most campaigns targeting conservatives and right-wing voters, where the messaging encouraged these groups to support the campaign. Those main groups that could challenge Trump were then provided messaging that confused them, distracted them, and discouraged them from voting. What else do you have to know? They said all the Russian energy at activating conservatives on issues like gun rights and immigration and stealing the political clout of African American voters by undermining their faith in elections. That was the rigging, it's all rigged. And spreading misleading information about when to vote, how to vote, absentee ballots, all kinds of, misleading information about how and when and where to vote. And other groups like Latinos and Muslims, gay men and women, liberals, veterans, they got attention from Russians who were operating thousands of social media accounts specifically targeted to them. We got the first detailed analysis in this report of what YouTube was doing. Now, YouTube belongs to Google and Instagram in the Russian campaign. And we also got anecdotes on how Russians used other social media platforms, Google+, Tumblr, Pinterest, email accounts from Yahoo, Hotmail, Gmail. Now, there was criticism for these companies in this report, but I'm not going to go down that road right now. But Facebook provided the Senate with copies of posts from 81 Facebook pages and information on 76 accounts that were used to purchase the ads, but did not share posts from user accounts that were run by the Internet Research Agency. No, they went through friends of friends of friends, right? And they used private play. Brad Parscale, Cambridge Analytica, okay? Twitter made it very challenging for the outside researchers to collect and analyze the data on its platform through its public feed, according to the people at Cambridge. They said they are the hardest people to get to turn over data. But Facebook and Google, haven't commented on any of this. Twitter said it's made significant strides since the election to harden its digital defenses, blah, blah, blah. But here's what the report says. The reason why they did this, okay, and how they did this and who thought of it and why they thought of it. They actually looked at what the Russians did. The Russians were scared of social media because social media was organizing. It was an organizing tool for people who had been left out of their government's care and concern. Okay, let's put it that way. And oligarchs and authoritarians were stealing all the money from these countries. And like the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, when they got hip to the fact that they were being stolen from, the Russian protests against the KGB back in the 90s. Yeah, and the protests when Putin was, trying to make himself the leader for life and all this. And Hillary was saying, go ahead, Ukraine, stand up, right? So they were really scared of social media because it was this great organizing tool, and it was coordinating all of us, towards civil engagement. It was organizing protests and meetups and all kinds of things that ordinary people were using to connect to each other for the greater good. Russia said, well, why can't we use it to suppress them? Why can't we use it, for a different purpose, but the same tool? And so they decided they would use social media to gain social control. And they would manipulate all kinds of messages. They would manipulate, everything. They would manipulate all these groups. They would pretend that they were into civil rights, or they would pretend that they were, into gun safety legislation. But on one side, and on the other side, they would start screaming, "They're coming for your guns. They're coming for," right? Okay. And what the researchers found was that the Russians were so sloppy because remember when Al Franken was still senator? Before a photograph of him having, a stupid photograph taken on an aircraft coming back from a freaking USO tour, and a girl was sleeping in a flak jacket, like in a bulletproof vest, and he was like, he had his hands like that. Yeah. So you remember Al was like questioning, Facebook, and he was asking them, why didn't you catch the fact that they paid in rubles? And then we never heard anything else about it. Yeah, it's in this report. The researchers that compiled this report noted the sloppiness that these social media companies should have noticed. And one of the sloppy things that they did was Russia used rubles. They used its own currency to buy ads, and they used Russian phone numbers as contact information. There were also technical signatures in logs, like internet addresses in St. Petersburg. Like some of us who are a little bit advanced on the internet, like some of us who are just slightly more than click and go. Now, the click and go people, you may not know this, but this is a cool little thing you can do, and you don't need any, big internet skills. But if you want to know who owns a website, you just go to this website called Who Is. The word who, the word is, who is, and put in the company, and they'll show you who is this company. Who owns it? You could do it with ours. You could do it with my company. You can do www.randyrhodes.com. Say, who is www.randyrhodes.com, and they'll tell you it's me. Right? That's what they did. They did a basic who is thing, and then, they were able to see that they were using Russian phone numbers as contact information. The address of the actual website was RU. RU meaning Russia. They were Russian addresses. And they were able to find out that they started in U.S. politics in 2013 on Twitter. And of the tweets that the company provided to the Senate, 57% of them were Russian, 36% were in English, but they were in other languages too. And then they really started to manipulate Americans in 2014 and every year thereafter. And now they're more active than ever. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.